Before we go in and look at how to write the texture reports, how to configure them, let's just remind ourselves again of what we're aiming for. So it's a single report per scenario with all the texture deviations that we want. So you may want to take a snap of the headings I've used to help yourself configure your own reports. You may want to have different board textures, more, less. So back into our base report, the report in which we created our base stats. If you remember, I've partly completed some of these for the video purposes. I've got mine fully completed in this base report here for all the scenarios. So what I'll do is I'll show you how to do the first one, and then I'll flick back into my base report and I'll show you how they look like when they're completed. It'll just speed things up a bit for the video without sort of missing anything for you. So a little tip is, it's going to make things a lot easier if you start do your initial mask clone with the last row in your texture grid. So if I just drag over range research, bring it up, you can put this on your other screen. I know my last row is low two-tone connected flop with a non-flush closing turn and river. So I can put that on my other screen. Bring up pop-up editor again. The reason for that is it's gonna put them in the correct order for you then. If you don't do that, there's going to be a lot of cut and pasting involved, and you're likely to make a mistake, put a wrong row in a wrong place, something like that. So we'll mask clone this row now by custom filter, create filter. So we're going to be varying the board texture. So we go into hand strength, and over on the right here we can stipulate the board texture. So I wanted a low two-tone connected flop. So I'll specify that the high card is either 9 high or 8 high or 7 through 2 high. I also want it to be two-tone, so that's suitedness here. Exactly 2 cards of 1 suit. If you hover over the description, it'll give you an example. So select that. But if you notice, that's put it in as an OR. I want it to be 9 or 8 or 7 through 2 high and two-tone. So if I uncheck that, it'll remove it. I need to create a new stipulation here and put two-tone in there. I also wanted it to be connected, so is like a straightening board. So I'll create a new category. There's a section for straightness. So I feel like it's all of these. You can see examples. Then move into the turn. I want to stipulate that the flush doesn't come. So I'll say third card to a flush, not. Another card, another one, river. Third card to a flush, not. Now I can group all these together, these stipulations on the left, by pressing the Control key and selecting them one at a time, and then hit AND. So I just want to check that they've all been ANDed together. Hit OK. Check this as we want. And we'll give it a suffix, so space low two-tone, connected flop, non-flush closing turn, and river. Hit OK. And that's cloned that row for us. You can see the description's changed and the filter's changed. So we go on in that way, cloning for board texture. So if I skip back now to the one I've already completed, I'll show you some of the filters I've written. So this is my base tab. So we're starting at the bottom, so that's the one I just wrote. I've deleted some of the cells here because like the flop action, for example, is not really relevant when we're looking at a river filter, so I'll come back to that. So low turn that stays low, you can see is just a low flop, a low turn, a low river. Let's just go in, show you the filter. Low flop, low turn, low river. We could also select not turn overcard and not river overcard if we wish. Non-flush closing river. So when I've stipulated something flush not closing, I think it's important to stipulate first that it was two-tone on the flop, because what we're interested in is just those boards where there was a flush draw available that missed. So I've stipulated flush draw on the flop, and that the turn flush didn't come in, and the river flush didn't come in. And then with flush closing river, it's the same, but with no flush coming on the turn, but then the flush comes on the river. River overcard, there's just a direct filter for river overcard coming. These I've covered effectively. Rainbow turn, you can just go straight to the turn and stipulate that it's rainbow. Moving up to the flops now. For low rainbow disconnected, I've effectively defined connected in the same way as we did before. And then I've selected that it's not connected and not. So then I get into the high card textures. So I've split them into two-tone and rainbow. One I've described some in as, I know that's a symbol for less than 9 high, but I mean it in terms of 9 high or less. I just don't have the less than or equal to symbol on my keyboard, and so that's the way I've done it. You can do it as you want. So this is a 9 or 8 or 7 through 2 high board. That is also two-tone. And moving up to rainbow. Nine or 8 or 7 through 2 high board. That's rainbow. So you can go through and complete all your texture rows. You can add different ones to me if you wish. You can have less or more, however you want to do it. I'd just make sure you go in like before and use the test button. You can use the test button there. So you don't need to use the test button all the way across all these columns because you've already tested them when you did your base stats at the top. But you do need to test each row that you've gone down and created, because from this base sheet now, base tab, we're going to go off and create a bunch of mask clones varying positions, varying whether it's single raised pot or 3-bet pot, varying bet sizes and stuff like that. And you don't want to go off and do all that with a mistake in your original. So once you've completed that process, you'll have a big block of stats. Create your headings, enter them in manually in the left-hand column here, so that each row is connected to the right heading before you start sort of cutting and pasting things so that they don't get lost. And then you want to sort of make it a bit more presentable by chunking things up by flop, turn and river. So when you've got your big block, you can just click on a row, add a row, move everything down. We can delete this for now. So like I would start at the bottom and above river over, I would add 3 rows to give myself a gap there. And then above turnover, I'd add 3 rows to give myself a gap. And then within the flops, I've just separated it a little bit to make it a bit easier on the eye by adding an individual row. And then at the top of that, I'll add another 4 rows. Put your headings in the relevant places for flop, turn, river. Change the font on them if you want. You've created space now to enter back in your PO heading. Change the font. So now you've got your base tab completed. So what we want to do now is go through and manually delete the sections that aren't relevant, so that when we look at it at the end, it's not giving us like a series of zeros or data that's not really worth looking at. We're just focusing on the data that's actually relevant. Because like I said, the flop action, when we're thinking about what the river card was, we're not really interested in what the flop statistics were at that point. We're going to be looking at the flop texture when we're interested in what the flop action was, such as in position stabbing the flop, like in this column. So go through and sort of think your way through it and delete the relevant bits. So now you want to create yourself a new tab. So this is the completed one that I've got. Give it a name. Give it your headings. Go back to your base tab. This is the one I'm going to be working from now. So go back to your base tab. Select the whole thing, the whole block, down to there. Copy and paste that into the tab you just created for yourself. The situation with the scenario we're talking about. So let's say big blind versus small blind. Copy and paste that in with all the headings going right to the top there. So now you've got your base stats in your new tab. Now you want to vary this whole block to make it big blind versus small blind. So select the whole block, mask clone the whole thing, and input the relevant positions. I'm not going to do it here, because if I do, it's going to create me like 100 new stats, in my folder, and it's just gonna sort of mess up my folder for me. So I'm not going to do this. I've already done it. I'm showing you the procedure. I think that's enough. So when you do the mass clone now, in this way, varying it by position, it's going to copy it all. It's going to insert it all immediately below. So while you've got this top block highlighted, you can just delete that base data because you've got it safely stored back in your base tab. Then go down, select the block, cut, paste, put it right back up in the top there in the space. So now you'll have a block just like mine. You won't have the PO data in there yet. You'll have a block just like mine of stats mass cloned to be big blind versus small blind. And you can go on doing that, create a new tab, different positions, in the same way I've shown you in the previous section, but now we're doing it by block from that base tab for the whole relevant block of texture stats. So if you want to do the outer position single raise pot as the prefab razor, select the whole block, copy it into your newly created tab, same way I just explained. Mass clone it in your newly created tab, cut and paste it up to the top, and you're done. This does take a bit of work to create all your rows there of texture stats, to create your new tabs, copy and paste your base stats in, do your mass clone for the whole block by position. But I think you can see now the benefit when you look at all the individual reports and all the individual stats we've got here now. I think you can see the benefit of the sort of the mass clone methodology, starting with your base stats and mass cloning off from there. It's just really important to check as you go when you're compiling your base stats, like I've said, so that mistakes from your base don't carry over everywhere. When you come to do your 3-bets, it's handy to create like a 3-bet base. So here I've got in position 3-bet as the aggressor. So I've taken the single raise pot scenario, I've copied it in, I've mass cloned to make it a 3-bet, like I showed you in the previous section when I just did it one row at a time. Now I've mass cloned for the whole block to make the whole block a 3-bet. And so from then, that 3-bet base, I can go off and I can create variations by position. So for example, button versus cut off, or middle position through button versus early position through cut off. You can also then filter the mass clone the whole block to vary by bet sizing as well. So I've shown you enough now to be able to go and create your texture reports. If you didn't do the step to create your single raise pot and your 3-bet pot individual reports earlier, you can quite conveniently now take, once you've gone off and you've done your texture reports, you can just go and take the top line of the relevant texture reports and copy and paste those to create yourself your single raise pot report and your 3-bet pot report, because you've already done the mass clone for that main row. You don't, you know. Whereas earlier, for the guys who didn't want to do the texture reports, I showed them how to do that mass clone row individually. So to recap what we've done, we've gone through and we've learned how to create filters from scratch, storing them in the same folder. We've created a big row of base filters, base stats. From there we've mass cloned to create the single raise pot and 3-bet pot reports. We varied them by position. We varied them by bet size where appropriate. Then in this part we've looked at how to mask clone to create texture reports to vary the board texture. I've given you some examples of things to look out for in that, how to do the procedure and the things to look out for. Then we've looked at how to do the mask clone for the whole block to vary that whole block of texture stats by position or by single raise pot to 3-bet pot or by bet sizing. We've also seen how to cut and paste and create new tabs and make things look presentable, and how to include the total data point hand statistic. The same applies, as I've told you before, when you make changes in the pop-up editor or in your filter editor, you need to hit save. And then before you can view these in range research, view the results of these changes in range research, you need to go back to your main screen, clear stats, build stats, and then in range research, rebuild your report. So that's it for this hand to note tutorial.